Okay. Is it on? Okay, nice. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay. So, so we have to talk about a few properties of action potential. One of the first is propagation. Now, what's propagation? Propagation means the propaganda. What does it mean? Something increase, trafficking, or like that. So, what is propagation? Basically, the action potential, which has to be elicited, started at a particular point where a stimulus arises. Any stimulus arises on a neuron at a particular place, and from that it has to move along the axis of the core of the neuron. Now we know that it could be cell body, it could be dendrite. On its membrane, some stimulus has to arise. Transfer its energy. It could be photon of light in case of eyes, for example. It could be sound waves in case of ears. It could be pressure of the blood in aorta in case of the receptors, or anything. It could be any stimulus that is arising on a neuron. Now, when it arises, it actually opens the ion channels, sodium channels, as we know. That when the sodium channels open, sodium rushes in. This sodium is actually moving in all directions. Now, what happened? The major direction in which it should move is basically towards the axon, and that's a normal direction. If it is on dendrites, this will first moving towards the cell body, and from cell body this is moving towards the axon. Now, what's moving actually? The sodium ions. They're flowing, and they're flowing due to mostly. I don't want to go to much physics of it, but still, these are mostly moving because all positive ions are there by repulsion, repulsive forces. There are so many positive ions, and due to repulsive forces, they move, of course, far away from each other. And this is one of the forces which help them to move in multiple directions. Now, it has to move towards axon. And mostly what happens, as I explained in last class, that they will move in multiple directions, mostly in the cell body and also on the dendrites. More than one directions they will move. And if they reaches the axon hillock, then they will be transferred to the axon, and then will be transmitted to the next, or we see the message will be transmitted to the next neuron. So propagation is basically that movement of ions from one place to another place inside the neuron, maybe on dendrites, maybe on what you call it, cell body, even in axon. Propagation means its movement, transmission. Now, this spread, you can also very common word is we use spread. So it is actually spreading in various directions, and that is the most important phenomenon, one of those. Now, positive electrical charges, which is basically sodium ions in this case. I think I already explained that in few other types of neurons, like in a few insects and more, this could be potassium ions. This could be any other positive ion. Not necessarily, it's not necessarily always sodium ions. In very few neurons, mostly in insects and maybe more, these may be potassium or other ions, but this has to be positive, except for very few rare cases. We will talk about them later. Like in eye, it's different. In one or two more places. So, and that's why we call that membrane is depolarized. I explained it already that why we call it depolarized, because first of all, its polarization will go towards a zero charge, from minus to zero first. So we say it's depolarized towards neutrality, and then it can go towards positivity. And few of the neurons, like in a CNS, actually send a message at zero. So at neutral charge, send a message. Then a few larger neurons, they send message at from plus 10 to plus 35. It varies from neuron to neuron. This is all the electrotonic spread, basically, and we call it propagation. So let's have a look on the diagram. Yeah, just showing it. Self-explanatory. This is all taken from Guyton. Guyton, that is 11th or 12th edition, both you can use. So here you can see propagation. Here stimulus arises, sodium channels open, sodium ions enter inside, and you can see that they are moving in mostly both directions. If this is an axon, then they will move unidirectionally, always from cell body towards the N terminus. In axon, this is unidirectional because the purpose of axon is actually to transfer the message. Purpose of cell body and dendrites is to receive the message and transfer the message towards or ions towards the axon. And purpose of axon is to transfer the message. We transfer these ions from the cell body towards the end terminals. That's the purpose. So that's why it happens like this. So it could be bidirectional in case of cell body and dendrites both, and in case of axon, unidirectional. There could be one case of bidirectional transmission, that is electrical transmission. If this is an electrical transmission between electrical synapse between the two neurons, then what will happen? Sodium ions can directly transmit, as I have explained in the last lecture, that they are very closely connected, and ions cannot escape from the channels. These are two. If this is a membrane having channels like this, they are too close that ions cannot escape here and there, and ions from this cell will directly enter into the next cell. Now, when they can enter and the channels are open, they can come back. Simple. So that could be bidirectional even in axon. In the case of what? Electrical synapse. Electrical synapse. This is possible. So this is called propagation. This is the first concept. Then direction of propagation, I already explained the direction of propagation, but excitable membrane has no single direction of propagation, like I'm saying, cell body and dendrite. But the action potential travel in all directions from that stimulus. Now see, we are mostly looking here. Here, we are looking at a two-dimensional diagram, precisely. It is actually three-dimensional. If we look at the three dimensions, so cell is like this, ions are moving in all directions. As I said, mainly due to repulsion between positive charges. Okay, so then more properties. First property, we have talked about it, all or nothing, or all or none principle. Sometimes we call it all or none. Sometimes we call it all or nothing. This means that when this I and O principle, on or off. There is no, slow, less, more. They are transmitting a message or they are not transmitting a message. But this is true only for transmission through axon, not on the cell body. They are receiving many signals, but if those are not reaching for and not reaching till the axon hillock, no message will be transmitted. After some times, sodium channels will close and all those sodium ions are going back to the extracellular fluid by sodium potassium pump, because it is throwing all the time free sodiums out, and these pumps will work faster. Abhi humne ye discuss karna hai. These pumps will work faster after an action potential has occurred. So when action potential finishes, all sodiums are inside, all potassiums are outside. Now all the sodium potassium pumps will work faster, and they will throw all the sodium out in some time, in milliseconds, and take all the cause the and what we call influx of all the potassium ions which are outside and make the normal balance in few milliseconds. So that cell is ready to receive the next stimulus. So all or nothing is true for axon. That is, when these ions they enters the axon hillock, then they will be transmitting a message. If they do not enter the axon hillock, they are not transmitting a message. So I or O, on or off. This is called all or nothing or none principle. So this is well. So the others, summation. Summation means, as everyone can understand, summing up. I was saying that more than one messages or more than one stimuli may be arising close to each other, and one neuron is actually maybe receiving sometimes hundreds of stimuli. You have seen the dendrites. In the beginning, I have shown a few pictures which are showing that there may be hundreds of dendrites on one neuron. So one neuron may be receiving hundreds of signals at the same time. Now, all those are activating and opening sub-sodium channels. And sodium is rushing in at multiple points on a cell body and on the dendrites. Definitely. So now, when all those two or three which are close together, will naturally their ions will move towards each other and will be summed up. When all the ions they are moving from this direction, these are moving from this direction, they match, they close to each other, they causes a more rising spike. So they can actually move more faster towards the axon helix. So more the summation effect, more the I can say more faster transmission towards the axon hillock of the ion is possible. तो जितनी ज़्यादा synapses होंगे उतनी ज़्यादा possibility होगी कि जल्दी action potential जो है वो generate हो जाए basically because it reaches the axon hillock. So this is called summation. The stimuli will sum up simply. Latency is a term that is used from initiation to peak. Do you remember that depolarization curve? Like a normal distribution curve. Now what happened? That latency is from initiation when the stimulus arrives and the peak reach. So time from initiation to the peak is called latency. Now latency is important because what happened? That in all of those neurons in which we are ये जितने लोगों ने मास्क नीचे किए हुए हैं फौरन ऊपर गए प्लीज मैं इसके समेत बोल रही हूँ बैठे बैठे जो हम मास्क नीचे किए so why this is important? Latency is important because how fast the message has to be transmitted depends. It is from 1 to 3 milliseconds or like that normally. Now, it depends upon how much a neuron is adapted for faster or slower message transmission in comparison. So, if latency is smaller, it means a faster peak will be arriving and that fast message will be transmitting to the next neuron. Simple as that. So, latency period shorter means a quicker action potential will be generated and latency less means that it takes some more time probably. Then refractory period, we talked about it, say the time period in which the neuron is not ready for the next stimulus to arrive. Simply because what happened that at that time sodium channels are inactivated and all sodium is inside. Because sodium is inside, sodium channels are open or closed doesn't matter. But in fact what happened that sodium channels are inactivated during that time. So if a stimulus arrives, what a stimulus will does, open sodium channels. Sodium channels are already open but inactivated. Second, it will have to cause the influx of sodium ions. And sodium ions are where? They are all inside. So physically possible nahi hai next stimulus ka arrive, uska action time. So this time, refractory period is, we can say, this is the time between two action potentials, in which cell is non-responsive to a stimulus. That may be shorter or longer depending upon different types of neurons. Chota ho sakta hai, bada ho sakta. Then we are actually not going into the details of these phenomena. We're just defining them. This is not the main part of this course. अगर कोई न्यूरोबायोलॉजी पढ़ाएगा तो इनको इलाबोरेट करें, इनकी इलाबोरेशन जो है हमारे पास इतनी कैपेसिटी है कि हमने सारे सिस्टम कवर करने. So if someone is interested, they can study in Guyton in the details. Then accommodation. This is basically the base for learning and memory. How are all based upon accommodation? हाँ, ये शोर की वजह से try speak a little louder. मुझे यहाँ इसलिए खड़ा होना पड़ रहा है ताकि वो लोग भी सुन सकें जो are on the other side. So accommodation is basically modification, slowing down or speeding up of a response to a benign stimulus. See, benign means which is not actually producing much a response. But this is a weaker definition. The book definition, the better definition is this, that any kind of modification into a response of any stimulus. Whenever a stimulus arises, what kind of response should be there? Should action potential be generated? The message will be transmitted, or message will not be transmitted. It all depends upon opening of sodium channels. See, one thing, how many sodium channels will open based upon positive feedback, and then what's the response when the cell transmits a message to the next cell. See what will happen. The next cell is doing something. This is the principle on which our whole learning and memory based. Give you one example, a very common one. You have seen a snail. Ever touched it? When we are kids, we try to do that. Touch its head. If we touch its head, what it does? Retract it. वो अंदर चला जाता है, right? Then, if you keep doing that, do it second time. What will happen? Not completely repulse, but it will do repulsion. थोड़ा सा अंदर करेगा, फिर देखेगा कि क्या हो रहा है, right? Then, if you do it third time, maybe it just hold itself, don't move, but don't retract the head. If you keep doing that, after some time, this will not respond and keep moving. कुछ नहीं हो रहा, बोलेगा इस शेर के दांत नहीं है, right? क्या है? ये someone is saying to you something again. मैं बोल रही हूँ मास्क करो, दाढ़ी घुरी रही है. See, I have to tell you how to respond. If I'm not implementing, थोड़ा सा कहा, फिर किसी ने नहीं पहना, मैंने नहीं देखा, राइट? क्लोजर एग्जांपल है ना. मैंने कहा अच्छा नहीं पहना, अच्छा इग्नोर कर देती. अगर मैंने दोबारा कहा नो, ऊपर करें, नीचे क्या हो, फिर क्या होगा कि बोलेगा कि नहीं ये कंप्लाई करना पड़ेगा. दिस इज कॉल्ड लर्निंग इन मेमोरी. इफ देयर इज अ स्टिमुलस व्हिच रिजल्ट्स इन अ बेनाइन रिस्पांस, स्टिमुलस से मैसेज ट्रांसमिट होता है मगर उसका एक्शन कोई नहीं होता, उसका कोई इफेक्ट नहीं होता. यू आर टचिंग इट, यू आर नॉट हार्मिंग इट, राइट? And when the cell is actually transmitting a message to the other cell is transmitting this message to another cell, and that is transmitting message probably to the muscle C to retract, for example, in case of snail. A lot of energy your body is utilizing in this whole process, and this is something we call neuronal networks. Right? Now, no human body is a system. Take it as a system and not a emotional or other being. Right? It's a system. No system wants to waste its energy on the things which are not leading towards a reward or a punishment. This is principle of the nature, that no system, body wastes its energy on something which is not leading towards a reward or punishment. This stimulus is benign. Means you are touching it, you're not harming it. Touch किया ना, क्या हुआ? harm तो नहीं हुआ उसमें, ठीक? So क्या करेगा? उसको respond में बंद कर देगा. Your body does the same. So it actually saves a lot of energy in this way, and that is called accommodation. And this is the basis of whole of the learning and memory process. You remember the things because there is a reward. You remember the things because there is a punishment. You touch something, it's hot. We say generally, if you ask them not to try it, they will always try it once. और जब एक बार गरम लगेगा, चुभेगा, कुछ दोबारा वो नहीं करेंगे. क्यों? There is a punishment. एक बार आपने कोई काम उनको कहा, उन्होंने सीखा, आपने से रिवॉर्ड दिया, अच्छा है, take a biscuit, take something. What will happen? They will get a reward. Then these neuronal networks will continue. They will actually keep engaged with each other. And because they have utilized a lot of energy, just for example, for revival of after repolarization, for revival of the sodium potassium movement, see, I say concentrations inside and outside, sodium potassium pump have to work a lot. और हर एक ट्रांसफर के लिए कितनी एनर्जी यूटिलाइज कर रहा है? 180. It's a huge amount of energy. That's why our nervous system is utilizing a lot of energy of our body. So accommodation is based upon all reward and punishment. to which stimulus body neurons are going to respond, to which stimulus neurons are not going to respond. After some time they learn, and this learning is based upon multiple things. We are not going to detail of that, but just one example. For example, in a neuron, what you have heard studied the synaptic transmission, chemical synapses. What happened in chemical synapse? Neurotransmitters are released. Then to postsynaptic. Okay, and postsynaptic membrane do have receptors, right? To which a neurotransmitter go and attach, and then the message is transmitted. This is the basic mechanism. Now the neurotransmitter is released because there are calcium channels inside the N terminals, and calcium enters inside the N terminal if the membrane is depolarized. When the membrane is depolarized, then calcium channels they open in the N terminal, and calcium enters inside. When calcium enters inside, it go and attach to the secretory vesicles which are storing the neurotransmitters, and then they release it. I repeat that. When the membrane is depolarized, axon से action potential आई और उसने depolarize कर दिया membrane को, सोडियम बहुत सारी इसके अंदर आ रही. When it happens, it opens the calcium channels. Calcium enters in. Calcium go and activate the secretory vesicles which are having neurotransmitter stored inside them. Those go and release the neurotransmitter outside. Message is transmitted. Okay. Now, in a case of accommodation, if nothing is happening in response to all that, for which cell utilize a lot of energy, then what will happen? Those calcium channels on the membrane of N terminal will be reduced in number. Cell क्या करेगा? Calcium channels membrane पर ही है ना, proteins हैं, उनको retract back कर देगा. Those will be internalized by endocytosis. So calcium channel number will be reduced on the membrane. So when an action potential arrives, much less calcium is there, almost negligible release of neurotransmitter, no transfer of message. Neurotransmitter release नहीं होगा या बहुत थोड़ा होगा, message transfer. So cell अपनी energy save करता जाएगा. There are more mechanisms like that. This is just one I explained. That's how our cells learn to keep a pathway open or not to keep a pathway open. बिल्कुल ऐसे जैसे हम ड्राइविंग सीखते हैं. After some time, it actually is set to our senses. We are talking, we are thinking, we are doing everything, but we are driving, right? But if you leave it for 6 months, for driving, you see, for example, you press the clutch, then you have to press the clutch, see if it is a manual transmission, for example. Then you have to move your steering and how much, right? Then you have to change the gear or maybe set it to drive, or in case of the other transmission and so on. All these things are set to your particular neuronal networks, and you are automatically doing it. But if you leave it, see, for 6 months, what will happen? Your body is thinking that this is a waste of its resources to keep all those networks open. You know, those calcium channels have to be produced by DNA and set to the membrane, keeping those in the membrane, right? Then all those pathways, keeping all those pathways open, producing that neurotransmitter always, and keeping it in the storage vesicles, making those storage vesicles. Cell is using its resources. So if the body thinks that you are not using it, now that energy should be utilized for other purposes, and slowly stop producing those calcium channels, for example. Stop producing that neurotransmitter. Reduce production of those secretory vesicles by the neurotransmitter whole process. So whole process is actually, we can say, reverted back. तो जब आप 6 months के बाद ड्राइविंग करेंगे, आप भूलेंगे, ओह अभी गियर प्रेस करना था, ओह नो ब्रेक, टाइमली ब्रेक नहीं लगेगी, स्टीयरिंग उतनी मूवमेंट ठीक से नहीं होगी. Same goes for swimming, writing, typing, any other skill that you think. And this is whole is happening. This is called accommodation. That your neurons are accommodating to different types of situations that are arising. So whatever you are doing, those pathways will be retained, and that you are not doing, pathways will slowly go back. Yes, Ahmed is having. Actually, हाँ बिल्कुल. बिल्कुल, that is called the network because other neurons are doing it. Second thing, the feedbacks. So this is complicated, frankly speaking, very complicated to understand. That those neurons who are actually receiving a message, how they decide, okay, how they decide. This is generally based upon a network of neurons because all of these functions are complicated. As I'm saying, driving. See, driving को मतलब आपके कितने सारे muscles use हो रहे हैं, right? Your hand is using, your fingers are using, your toes are using, you're using your toes, you are using lot many muscles of your feet, and all those are coordinated by a complex network of neurons. Now, what will happen? That all of those, when they are connecting to each other, they are actually also getting feedbacks. Feedback means that you are how much you are using it. That complex network in itself, mostly the interneurons in the brain, they somehow response to that feedback about utilization of it. And then there's a decision of breaking off a pathway, slowing down maybe, or maybe increasing its intensity. जैसे आप ज़्यादा करोगे तो practice करते जाओगे इतना वो network उतना stronger होता जाएगा. Probably people say that mostly this is due to calcium channels. Mostly the calcium channels are regulated, and how they are regulated, calcium channel is a protein. The story goes back to DNA. Probably those protein, and secondly neurotransmitters. These are different compounds. These have to be formed inside the cell, and they have to be formed inside cell by enzymes. And what are enzymes? Proteins. So who's making that? DNA. Now story ends at the DNA because definitely somehow the regulatory part of DNA is modifying its functioning of how much an enzyme have to be made, how much enzyme is required, how many these calcium channels are required to be present on the membrane. So story ends at probably regulatory region of DNA. Somehow they are modified by these feedbacks that they are getting. That is this pathway being used or not being used. Same goes for you playing a violin. You are reading a book. You are comprehending things. इसीलिए कहते हैं critical thinking सिखाएं बच्चों सीखिए. Okay, it is very intelligent but is not trained well. फर्क पड़ेगा. Intelligent means that they are able to make more pathways. I don't know इस पर debate है, but still people think that intelligence precisely means that what kind of and how many pathways some person can make. Because some people are having this particular fingers for making art. हर कोई अच्छा art नहीं बना सकता. Some people have fingers to play violin well. Some have to play piano or something. And that is based upon that which networks are genetically strong. Now again story ends at DNA. What kind of combinations you are having, what kind of structures you are having. Your fingers, mostly your lambi fingers wale hote hain, the artists. Why? Because most probably they are having some connections which are directed by their DNA, regulatory DNA precisely, making particular kind of ion channels in particular kind of cells. Same goes for intelligence in mathematics, science, surgery, right? It's like that. This whole story is called accommodation. That is the base of learning and memory. वो सारा process इसी के through होता है, develop होता है, and it starts right from a child, a baby. It is born. It is having minimum neuronal connections. When it is born, it's like a clean brain. If you see, neurons will be quite far away, looking like neurons at distances. After that, they start making connections. See, it is said at the age of 3 years, a kid is having maximum number of connections. Actually, double or triple than the adult. कितने बनाता है? फिर कौन से retain होने और कौन से नहीं होने? This is all based upon accommodation, learning and memory. Reward and punishment. For the things, it will have rewards. To continue those pathways, all others have to be lost. So at the age of 6, it is losing half.
Do you think genetically to be determined as well?
Yes, definitely, because the regulatory regions of DNA are deciding from beginning that how these have to be made. But of course, there is an environmental intervention then, because those will be, I am saying again that those will be kept who are having a reward. Those will not be kept who are not having a reward. तो एक बहुत इंटेलिजेंट बच्चा अगर आपसे कहता है नहीं इलाज ही पढ़ना है, इस साइंस में नहीं डॉक्टर बनना है, अब वो बच्चा तो आर्टिस्ट बनना था, अच्छा सा, अच्छा आर्टिस्ट नहीं बनेगा, बुरा डॉक्टर बन जाएगा. क्यों? क्योंकि आप उसका रिवॉर्ड उस चीज के लिए दे रहे हो जिसके लिए वो बना नहीं है, राइट? वो कोशिश तो करेगा, तो होगा क्या, कुछ स्ट्रेंथ तो उसको मिलती जाएगी, ठीक? क्योंकि जेनेटिकली प्री डिटरमिन नहीं है, इसलिए उतनी स्ट्रांग नहीं मिलेगी जितनी किसी और पर्सन को हु इज गिफ्टेड विद दैट मिलनी चाहिए थी। ये फर्क आ जाएगा। तो रेगुलेटरी डीएनए मॉडिफाई तो करेगा खुद को बेस्ड अपॉन द एक्सपीरियंस, रिवॉर्ड एंड पनिशमेंट, लेकिन उतना अच्छा नहीं जितना किसी और केस में हो जाता। तो जेनेटिकली डिटरमिन होती तो है, और ये तो एविडेंस भी है, मीन सोशल एविडेंस तो है ना, ये काफी लोगों में होती है ये चीज। Like if your parents are like artists, you're one of the kids do have that capacity. Someone is a scientist or a mathematician, one of the kids may have that capacity. Maybe someone is having combination or like that. So वो आती तो डीएनए से ही है, तो रिकॉम्बिनेशंस बनते हैं उसके अंदर, which enhance.
मैम वो environmental influence की वजह से नहीं हो सकता?
Hello, yes.
वो environmental influence की वजह से नहीं हो सकता?
बिल्कुल होता है environmental influence. If I say it, I'll say that half goes to the genes and remaining half goes to the environment. Because if environment is modified, see something a kid is doing good but not getting a reward of that. See making a very good drawing but not encouraged, right? Solving a good mathematical problem but not encouraged, right? And doing an okay drawing but say, oh, encouraged, good, we will try it again. When practice, they will get better drawings. Maybe their fingers are not made for those, right? So half almost genes and remaining half environment. It's like that. This is accommodation, and this is based for all learning and memory. So here it is. Anyone else? You have a question here or there? These are the 5 common properties we talked about. Okay, we are ending it here because next topic I want to cover it. That is myelination and the nerve conduction. I think everyone do have an idea of myelin sheaths, right? We have to talk about its technical details and what are the physiological effects. First thing, what's the structure, and then what's the function, because all functions and structures are always related. So anyone here do have a question? On the other side, online students? No one there? यहाँ से भी clear? ठीक है, चलिए अभी पढ़ेंगे तो फिर पता चलेगा कितना क्लियर है। ओके, ये जो गाइटन का एडिशन है, 12th एडिशन, दैट इज अवेलेबल इन पीडीएफ फॉर्म फ्रॉम वेरियस साइट्स ऑन द इंटरनेट। 12th एडिशन कहीं से भी बहुत इजीली मिल जाएगा। आई सजेस्ट 13 शायद कुछ को मिले कुछ को ना मिले तो वेरिएशन होगी। आई सजेस्ट एवरीवन डाउनलोड दैट 12th एडिशन। मैं ऑफिशियली शेयर नहीं कर सकती क्योंकि वो दैट्स द होल बुक। आई ट्राई टू एक्सट्रैक्ट चैप्टर्स, इफ यू वांट इट फॉर यू देन आई कैन डू दैट। अगर आप पूरी बुक डाउनलोड करना चाहते हैं, राइट डाउन टेक्स्ट बुक ऑफ मेडिकल फिजियोलॉजी गाइटन से पीडीएफ, so you will get it. That's the way if you want to do that. Okay, if you want me to share the chapters, here slides you can see. I simply put the text. That is all from Gaitan. ये नीचे reference देखा है. I think page numbers are also here on this PPT at some places. Here you can see. This is this figure, chapter like that. Because we are studying this whole thing from Gaitan. That's the simplest form of nervous physiology. Nervous system physiology is complex in most of the books. Gaitan is because Gaitan is precisely textbook of medical physiology. Say medical physiology. Medical students study it in the first semester. So what happened that this is the simplest way of doing it. That is written simplest in simpler terms for doctors, basically doctors to be. उनके लिए आसान वर्ड्स में लिखी होती है, इसीलिए मैंने यहाँ पे सिलेक्ट किया। मोस्टली गाइटन में से हम फिजियोलॉजी को स्टडी करें। फिजियोलॉजी के कॉम्प्लेक्स बुक्स हैं, वो 4 मंथ्स में आपको समझ बिल्कुल नहीं आएगी। ओके, इसलिए मैंने गाइटन को सिलेक्ट किया है कि वी आर स्टडीइंग टेक्स्ट बुक ऑफ मेडिकल फिजियोलॉजी विद गाइटन। कोई भी एडिशन ले लें, एवरीथिंग विल वर्क, बट प्रेफरेबली ट्राई टू गेट 12th। और इसके अगर कोई हार्ड कॉपी, मेरा ख्याल आजकल तो सजेस्टेड नहीं है, पढ़ना चाहे तो वो लाइब्रेरी में काफी कॉपीज हैं। Someone want to get it and study on the book, right? Attendance is marked, so thank you very much. You're ready to go. On Monday we'll continue with this.
और तो आपने अटेंडेंस लगाएंगे या मैं क्या करूँ क्योंकि आई एम रिसर्च स्टूडेंट सो आई एम ऑन कैंपस
ओके टेल मी योर नेम आई
आयशा जारी
हाँ मैंने आपको मार्क किया ठीक है
अटेंडेंस लगाएंगे
बस करो
My attendance is not now.
मैंने वो बोले सिंगल और नंबर वाले
मेरा और है हॉस्टल आइटम्स तो पहले ऑनलाइन क्लासेस की
अच्छा ओके ठीक है नाम बता दें
आयशा
आयशा अमीन
आयशा
यस
हनसारी
ओके आयशा नाम तारिक ठीक है बेटा आप दोनों के लिए जी जी हाँ नंबर माय जी अहमद अटेंडेंस हम कर देते जी समवन इज आस्किंग समथिंग
पिछली 2 क्लासेस
can ask.
में अब हुआ था या क्या?
हाँ लास्ट क्लास में मैंने मैसेज किया था मैं नहीं आई थी लास्ट टाइम वेंसडे को आई वाज ऑन लीव इसके क्लास में आई
अच्छा तो मिस कुछ नहीं किया?
हाँ बिल्कुल वेंसडे को मैं लीव पर थी ना मैं कॉलेज नहीं आई और क्लास भी नहीं ली इसलिए
और मैम
तो वो बाद में हम
होगा
अटेंडेंस ये आपके नाम मेरे पास टेकिंग अ स्नैपशॉट
ठीक है थैंक
okay
यू सो
so
मच
thank you very much now you guys can leave if you want to if you don't have a question you can leave I have taken your attendance as a picture okay thank you everyone so I'm ending the meeting thank you